being too in love with the end result. And I think this will be best for people who are really goal-oriented or who are big planners, who are highly organized, who like systems, who maybe would describe themselves as overthinkers, or people who just like put a lot of thought into something very deliberate, more on the cautious side. I feel like cultures around the world have different relationships to goals. You know, individual people do, but cultures as well. And in the West, generally, we have a much more rigid, goal-oriented way about thinking about things and designing things. And, you know, right away I'm thinking school is usually more formalized, you know, the way we learn. Careers are usually more formalized than in many other parts of the world. Even certain interactions and meetings and our sense of time tends to be more maybe precise and scheduled, you know, or, especially in islands. If you've ever been on an island, time there is very fluid. I'm going to take a second and hopefully this is an entertaining, like, little tangent I'm going to go on, but I just think about this and laugh compared to how we think about time in the West usually, right? So I was vacationing with my family in the Grand Caymans once. Yes. It was the Cayman Islands, Grand Cayman specifically. And my siblings and I, we were going out to this other part of the island, and the person at our hotel recommended that we grab one of the buses because they make routine stops around the island. One of them was right outside our hotel, and it also would take us to the destination on the other side of the island. We were like, awesome. And so we went to the bus stop and we asked her what time the bus comes. And she's like, oh yeah, you know, just stand out there. It'll arrive, which already is so vague. Just, yeah, stand at the bus stop. It'll come when it comes. Westerners, I think, have this mentality. When you come to the islands, it just really releases you from it. But yeah, so luckily we had hours until we had to get somewhere. Either that or like it didn't really matter when we arrived. Like we have things we wanted to do, but it wasn't so, like, there was no time restriction. But I remember we were standing out there and it'd been like 10, 15 minutes. So we were just kind of getting antsy because there wasn't a sign either. And so we were just kind of standing on the side of the road, and like, I felt dumb. I was like, we were just like, you know, I mean, we trust that the person knows what they're talking about, but like, we're just standing here, like watching cars go by every so often, but like, don't even know what kind of bus to look for, like what we're looking for. And so we see, she's actually a server we had the night before. She's on a bicycle, and I'm sorry, everything about my memories from the Grand Cayman feels like a fever dream. Yeah, so our just server from last night was riding on a bicycle past us while we were waiting for this vague, possibly imaginary bus. And, you know, so we wave her down. We're like, hey, and she's like, hi. And we were just asking, we're like, hey, do you know how often this bus comes by? And she was like, oh, yeah. It's like every 15 minutes, every 30 or an hour or 2 hours. And we're like, okay, all right. It really does feel like this arrives at any time. Listen, this sounds like it would have been the most frustrating experience, but that's if you had, you know, these rigid expectations. If you had this time that set this really strict itinerary, then yeah, this would have been a nightmare. But it was just funny. Like, that was one of my favorite trips because it really just forced you to just truly go with the flow. The bus did finally arrive. We did get on it and made a bunch of random stops. We had no idea when it was going to get there. We had no idea where it was going, really. Sorry, I just thought that was really relevant into what I'm going to go into, which is, you know, it is great to have goals. There's a reason that so much research has gone into, you know, proper goal setting, into managing our goals, into sticking with our goals, into achieving certain goals. It's because, I mean, there's so many benefits to having them, right? Getting to a certain destination, a big reason that my blog exists is because, this is the self-management podcast, right? Managing yourself does involve inviting introspection into what is good for you so that you can create a plan and goals moving forward and create outcomes that you enjoy, that are right for you, put your skills and your interests and really just designing a great life for yourself and for the people around you, all that stuff. That all, involves a level of planning, organization, discipline, self-management skills. So obviously I'm for these things. So, these are super, super valuable, worth deliberately cultivating. It progresses us as a species. It can limit some of our worst instincts. I can't say enough about how valuable these set of skills are and how worthwhile it is to pay attention to and to cultivate them, recognize your strengths and weaknesses in these domains. That's the point of so much of the content that I put out. But there is absolutely, positively, 110% too much of a good thing. So here is where I really wanted to offer a counter to over planning, over design, to overdoing it. So I just wanted to take some time here to explore the drawbacks of when we are too in love with the goal, with getting to an end result, with a certain outcome, and exactly why. I list a couple of reasons that I really want to dive into about how this can really harm you and undo a lot of the good things that you were probably originally aiming for. If you're enjoying this piece so far, hit like so I know to keep making content like this and the algorithm knows you find it useful. Hit the subscribe button too, and check out the Patreon link in the description for different ways to support this channel and all the bonuses you get. I'd love to have you on board and hear more about what you're enjoying specifically so I can kind of tailor it towards you. Okay, back to the video. So reason number one, honestly, is that this is just not a realistic way to look at life. It is so impossible that you are going to meet every single goal that you set. I don't know a person like it. I'm not a person like that. That life just gives you every single outcome just because you work for it or you plan for it. The more effective that we become at understanding life ourselves, the goals that we're working for, making them more realistic, more aligned with our goals, interests, all that stuff. Yes, it'll make it more likely, but there are a million things working in this universe, in our lives. It is so unrealistic to feel like it's always going to go your way. And life will be an extremely frustrating experience if that's your mindset. And I think what can make, at least for me, the transition to this understanding a little bit more difficult, and that I actually think in other parts of the world, they have this understanding much clearer, and that it's probably a more organic part of their understanding of living life, is that goal setting, that more rigid approach, actually works really well in an academic setting because academic settings are fairly controlled. It also works really well in most work settings because it has a similar structure, although it is very different than school in many ways, and it can be jarring to transition from school to work for a host of reasons. I think that both of those environments have an artificial structure to it that helps work get done reliably, and and there's systems for a reason so that a lot of people can work towards something as cohesively as you can get a group of people to do it. That's usually the aim of an organization, right? To accomplish more than a single individual could, right? Synergy or whatever those business buzzwords are. But yeah, both of those really controlled settings are really different than, I think, life. I think the pandemic is such a powerful reminder of how we imposed these structures on the planet, and that the natural world operates differently, and that they can go away, and that we have to adapt, and things can disappear, that life is it felt really uncontrollable, but I was listening to this podcast. Oh my gosh, I want to tentatively say Anne Duke is the author. I will link the author of the book because I really do think it was her who mentioned it. She is someone who deals with like probability and decision making. Anyway, the author of this book, she said something on a podcast I was listening to during the pandemic that was like, whoa, when I was listening to it. And she said that, in the pandemic, we think, wow, this is a really unpredictable era in life. But she's like, life is actually always this unpredictable. This is an event that scrambled things, but it's not different than the kind of surprising nature of just being alive on this planet, all the natural uncertainty of just existing, which is like, I don't know, it gives me goosebumps. Uncertainty isn't comfortable for most people, but she was kind of saying like, yeah, this time, what is it? Uncertain times, unprecedented times. Oh my gosh, those phrases, I never want to use them again. But she's like, yeah, this is unprecedented, but like the level of uncertainty of life, it's just unexpected things always happen, So anyway, that's all just to cover that reason number one, not to be too in love with the end result, your goals, outcomes, is because it is not realistic to believe that everything that you want to come to fruition, that you even work to come to fruition, or that you set up pretty decently to come to fruition will. And it can feel like a sad thing, and it usually is. It's disappointing. But when we get further into this list, you'll see how, and I'm sure if you reflect on life, you can see how that actually isn't a sad thing at all in many, many cases. So the next reason that being too in love with the end result is a problem is, you develop this vice grip on life. It makes you rigid, it makes you inflexible, and that always comes with pain, right? If you fight reality, you will always lose. And I have become so much more relaxed and fluid, not because that's how I naturally am or how I behaved or was. It's because I realized that I will not have peace without it. I think that's why, honestly, so far back, reaching back since high school, I have always loved Taoism, Buddhism too, not necessarily the more religious aspects, but the philosophies really capture the essence of existing and the nature of being alive, I think, really well. And it makes sense that these philosophies are known as the more peaceful ones is because when you move with life, your life just does become more peaceful. You resist less. You're putting up less of a fight. And when you fight life, you are fighting so far out of your weight class. And I think this is what is so difficult about self-improvement and moving forward and designing a good life for yourself. And really, really, I think what the work on my blog, the work I'm trying to do here is aiming at, and all of these efforts are for, it's sometimes persevering, pushing, motivating yourself to keep going when it is so, so tough, because a lot of things that are worth doing are hard and tough. And it doesn't mean that it's not right for you. It's just that it is naturally hard and tough, but will be worth it if you work for it, right? Developing mental toughness so you can grind when it matters, so you can do the right thing. That has a huge place in living this really awesome, purposeful, successful life, doing things that are scary, going forward even when you're nervous, changing your mind and acting and doing something that you know is right for you, but it just feels so uncomfortable, like that, right? But then also it's knowing when to release, to pull back, to completely let go, to course correct, to surrender. And and so it's like, so when do you know which one to do? Discernment. That's it. It's just learning what situation probably calls for which one. And you'll get it wrong sometimes, but the idea is that as you practice these skills and as we move forward and as we learn more and kind of gather more data, moving through life and reflecting and then moving forward and reflecting and learning, right? Gathering knowledge. That's what all of these research-backed sources are for when I write the longer form blog posts. Anyway, I don't want to get too far off topic, but basically, yes. So you can develop too tight a grip on life when you are too focused on achieving that singular goal. And when you're rigid and inflexible, life will hurt more because it's going to throw things your way. And if you're not able to embrace the more soft aspects of life, the letting go, the surrendering, the allowing, the rethinking. So yes, that's another reason not to get, so wrapped up in whatever goal and to really listen to the feedback that life and experience is giving you. That was really important for me personally, and learning, to back off. That's a really important skill too. Forging ahead, awesome skill to have. Learning to back off, surrender, accept, also a really, really peace-inviting skill to develop. So here is what I was mentioning earlier, where it isn't just, a sad thing that you can't always reach your goals, or that goals that you set out and that you work towards